The universe was a mess, but so was Captain Ren Voss's hair, and only one could be fixed in under 10 minutes. Spoiler alert, it wasn't the universe. He stood on the bridge of the ChronoBound, a timeship that had seen better days, much like its crew. Voss surveyed his crew with the same enthusiasm as a dentist before a marathon of root canals. The motley collection of misfits included his first officer, Kira Tan, who had the charm of a pit viper after a bad day at the office, and the ship's engineer, Milo Jax, whose primary talent was breaking things so thoroughly they somehow started working again. "Captain, we're getting some weird readings from the temporal scanner," Kira announced, tapping furiously at her console as if it owed her money. "Weird how? Like that's not my sandwich weird, or the universe is collapsing weird?" Voss asked, scratching the back of his head where a cowlick seemed intent on signaling nearby galaxies. Kira rolled her eyes. "Closer to the universe collapsing end of the spectrum." "Great, just what I needed," Voss muttered, stepping over to her console. The screen showed a tangled knot of timelines, all converging on a singular point like a party where no one wanted to show up sober. Milo popped his head up from inside an open panel, a smudge of grease decorating his forehead like a soldier's war paint. "Is it me, or do the timelines look like they're having a midlife crisis? More like end-of-life crisis," Kira quipped, not looking up. Voss sighed, a sound like the universe exhaling its pent-up frustration. "All right, team, what's the worst-case scenario here?" "Aliens hell-bent on erasing us from existence," Milo said, his tone as casual as if discussing the weather. "Not just any aliens," Kira added. "The Muroth, the self-appointed custodians of time, whose mission seems to include making sure humanity doesn't get too big for its britches." "Ah, the Muroth," Voss said. "Last time they tried to erase us, we gave them a bloody nose. It was beautiful in a we're all going to die anyway sort of way. They're like the cosmic trash collectors, but instead of picking up garbage, they eliminate species," Milo said, emerging fully from the panel. "And we're the banana peel in their path," Kira added. Voss chuckled darkly. "Well, at least they think we're a threat. Kind of a compliment, really." The ship shuddered, the lights flickering as if they were considering early retirement. "What was that?" Voss asked, not particularly surprised but still somewhat annoyed. "Temporal turbulence," Milo said, as if describing the latest dance craze. "Of course it is," Voss sighed. "So what's the plan, team? Besides the usual screaming and running, we need to isolate the timeline fracture point," Kira said. "If we can stabilize it, we might just prevent them from wiping us out." "And how exactly do we do that?" Voss asked, crossing his arms. Milo grinned, the kind of grin that made you question his sanity and your own existence. "We wing it, Captain. It's what we're best at." "Fantastic," Voss said, shaking his head. "A plan that involves no plan at all." The ship lurched again, and Voss had to grab the nearest console to keep from playing pinball with the bulkheads. "Okay, let's move. I'll be damned if I let some time-obsessed aliens play God with our history." Kira and Milo nodded, the grim determination of a crew who'd seen too much and cared too little about the odds. "Let's show those Muroth why humans are the most stubborn species in the galaxy," Kira said, "because who needs a proper plan when you've got sheer bloody-mindedness?" Voss added, "Kira, get us to that fracture point. Milo, keep this old girl running." "Aye, Captain," they responded in unison, the sarcasm barely concealing the underlying steel. As the ChronoBound hurtled through the tangled spaghetti of timelines, Voss couldn't help but think about all those history books being unwritten by the Muroth. "Erasing human history," he mused aloud. "Imagine all the bad decisions we could unmake." Kira smirked. "Yeah, but then who'd invent toilet paper?" Milo chimed in, "or pizza." Voss chuckled, the sound more bitter than sweet. "Good point. Let's make sure they don't get the chance." The ship's hull groaned as they closed in on the fracture point, a swirling vortex of chaos that reminded Voss of his last attempt at soufflé. Unstable, unpredictable, and likely to implode. "Steady as she goes," Voss called out, as Kira expertly maneuvered the ship into position. Controls hummed with tension, the crew's focus sharp as a vibroblade. "We're in position," Kira said, her fingers dancing over the console with the precision of a pianist playing their most desperate concerto. "Milo, commence Operation Save Our Sorry Skins," Voss commanded. Milo typed furiously, the keystrokes sounding like the staccato percussion of an impending failure. "Initiating stabilization sequence," he reported, his voice a mix of hope and impending doom. The ship vibrated violently, the metal framework protesting under the strain. "You ever think about a career change?" Voss asked Milo, gripping the console as though it was the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. Milo chuckled. "What and miss all this excitement? I'd rather face the vacuum of space." "You might just get your chance," Voss muttered. As the temporal energy swirled around them, Milo shouted, "Almost there, just need to." A sudden jolt interrupted him, the ship dropping like a stone in zero gravity. "What the hell was that?" Voss demanded. Kira's eyes widened as she checked her readings. "Temporal countermeasure. Must be the Muroth trying to shake us off." "Oh, good," Voss said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I was worried we'd get bored." The ship's alarms blared, a cacophony of impending doom that was all too familiar. "We've got incoming temporal distortions," Kira reported, her voice as tense as a string about to snap. Can we dodge them? Voss asked, already knowing the answer. Not unless you've got a miracle tucked away somewhere, Kira replied. Miracles are in short supply, Milo said, punching commands into his console with a fervor that suggested maybe, just maybe, they'd survive. All right, Voss said, taking a deep breath. Let's show these intergalactic janitors what it means to face humanity at its most desperate. The ship shuddered again, the engines roaring defiantly against the temporal onslaught. Milo, any bright ideas? Voss asked as the ship bucked and weaved like a drunk on a pogo stick. Just one, Milo replied, his grin a beacon of madness. We punch through. Punch through? Voss echoed, raising an eyebrow. Like brute force, Milo nodded. Exactly. If those Muroth a taste of human ingenuity. Voss laughed, a sound that was 1 part insanity, 2 parts desperation. All right, let's do it. Kira, full power to the engines. Time to show them we're not going down without a fight. Aye, Captain, Kira acknowledged, the ship surging forward with a burst of energy that rattled teeth and nerves alike. The vortex loomed ahead, a swirling maw of chaos that seemed to welcome them with open arms. Hold onto something. Voss advised as the ship barreled into the storm. The ChronoBound vibrated violently, the temporal energies clawing at its hull like rabid beasts. The crew held their breath, the silence punctuated only by the groans of metal and the relentless alarms. Time stretched and twisted, the ship caught in a battle of wills with the forces of the universe. Almost there, Milo shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. With a final defiant lurch, the ChronoBound broke through the vortex, emerging into calm space like a bruised and battered warrior staggering from the battlefield. Status, Voss demanded, taking stock of his crew. We did it, Kira said, disbelief tinging her words. We stabilized the timeline. Voss allowed himself a small smile. Well, what do you know, we're not dead. Milo grinned, his eyes alight with the thrill of survival, and we didn't even have to sacrifice anyone. Voss chuckled, that's always a plus. Now let's get the hell out of here before the Muroth change their minds. The ship powered up, the engines humming with renewed vigor as they set course for safer territories. You know, Voss said, leaning back in his chair, I think I could get used to this. Kira snorted. What, risking our necks every 5 minutes? Exactly, Voss replied. Keeps things interesting. As the ChronoBound slipped into the void, leaving the chaos of the fractured timeline behind. Voss couldn't help but wonder what fresh insanity awaited them. But for now, they were alive, and in this universe, that was victory enough. The universe might still be a mess, but at least Captain Ren Voss's hair was back in place. And sometimes, that was all you could hope for. Ren Voss sauntered into the ChronoBound's cramped mess hall, where the aroma of something akin to coffee, though it tasted more like engine lubricant, hung in the air. He found Kira and Milo already slouched at the table, expressions of grim determination plastered on their faces like they'd run out of more interesting expressions. Another day, another existential threat, Voss said, grabbing a mug of the dubious brew. Isn't life just a parade of delights? Kira looked up from her data slate. We've got company today. Zuri Korvath and Dr. Elandra Kesh are joining us. One's got more tech skills than sense, and the other's a historian who enjoys reminding us how often history repeats itself, usually to our detriment. Perfect, Voss said, settling into his chair. A genius and a pessimist, just what we need. As if on cue, Zuri Korvath strode in, wearing a jumpsuit festooned with more gadgets than a toddler with a box of crayons. Her hair was a mess of vibrant purple, a color that screamed, I'm either a genius or just very indecisive in front of the hair dye aisle. Morning, Zuri said, voice brimming with the kind of energy that suggested she hadn't slept and didn't plan to. Ready to save history, or at least put a dent in its backside. Dr. Elandra Kesh followed her, a woman with the demeanor of someone who spent too much time talking to ancient data logs and not enough with live humans. Captain, it seems the Muroth's interference is more systematic than we thought. They've infiltrated key historical events, and if we don't act, the next entry in the history books will be humans, a brief and unfortunate existence. Voss sipped his coffee, grimacing at the taste but pretending it was due to the news. So they're rewriting history, huh? Are they changing anything useful, like maybe skipping the invention of reality TV? Nothing that beneficial, I'm afraid, Kesh replied, her lips curling into a wry smile. They're targeting pivotal moments, ones that ensure humanity gets a fair shot at not screwing everything up. Zuri tapped a holographic display, and a timeline materialized in the air, dotted with red points like a rash on the universe's skin. Here, here, and here, she said, pointing out key moments. The Muroth are like kids with a new toy, only the toy is time itself, and the kids are sociopathic janitors. All right, Voss said, scratching his chin thoughtfully. How do we stop them from turning us into a bad footnote? Well, Zuri said, I've got a few gadgets that might help. A temporal disruptor, a phase shift capacitor, and something I call the oh crap button for emergencies. Kira leaned in. And what does the oh crap button do? If I knew. It wouldn't be as exciting, would it? Zuri replied, grinning. But in theory, it should scramble their temporal signature long enough for us to get a foothold. Sounds like a plan, Milo said, though his tone suggested he'd been around enough of Zuri's inventions to know plan was a loose term. "Oh, we just waltz into whatever historical event they're mucking about in and set off your little surprise." More or less, Zuri acknowledged. "Of course, there's the whole avoiding temporal paradoxes, not stepping on butterflies, the usual." "Great," Voss said, setting his mug down with a thud. "Kira, plot us a course for the nearest temporal hotspot. Milo, see if you can keep this tin can from tearing itself apart. Zuri, prep your gadgets. And Dr. Kesh, give us a crash course on how badly we might screw this up." "On it, Captain," they replied in unison, the kind of synchrony that only came from facing death together one too many times. The crew dispersed, and soon the ChronoBound was humming with the frenetic energy of a plan in motion. Voss watched the void slip by, stars streaking past like hurried commuters, and wondered, not for the first time, if they might actually pull this off. With the timeline's fate hanging by a thread, Kira piloted the ship toward the first target, a seemingly innocuous event in 2120, the signing of the Treaty of Earthly Cooperation, a moment that ensured humanity held it together long enough to join the interstellar community. Without it, Earth's history would look like a teenager's diary, full of angst and questionable decisions. Approaching temporal coordinates, Kira announced, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Brace for entry." The ship shuddered as they pierced the temporal veil, like a swimmer diving into unfamiliar waters. The corridors briefly warped, the universe playing tricks on the eye as they settled into the new timeline. "Welcome to 2120, Kira said, her voice taut with anticipation. "Population, us and a bunch of history's biggest egos." "Good times," Voss replied. "Zuri, you're up. What's the plan?" Zuri was already fiddling with her gadgets, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Simple. We sneak in, plant the disruptor, and scramble the Muroth's meddling. Then we leave quietly like we never existed. And if we get caught," Voss asked, knowing full well the answer. "Then we improvise," Zuri said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." Voss chuckled. "All right, team. Let's make history, or at least make sure it stays the way it's supposed to." As they prepared to disembark, Dr. Kesh offered one last piece of advice. "Remember, don't interact with anyone unless absolutely necessary. The timeline is fragile, and even a small change can have massive repercussions." "Got it," Voss said. "Don't step on any butterflies, don't seduce anyone's grandmother, and definitely don't bet on sports." The crew nodded, and with that, they stepped into history, each carrying the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders, which was quite heavy when coupled with nerves and a dash of caffeine-induced jitters. The world outside was a pristine relic of the past, or rather, the future's past. Buildings rose like monoliths of glass and metal, reflecting a sun that seemed a little too bright for comfort. People moved about, oblivious to the cosmic chess game being played right in their midst. "Time to find our meddling Muroth," Voss said, scanning the crowd for anything that didn't belong. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, only the needle was trying to destroy all of human history, and the haystack was made of bureaucrats. As they moved through the throng, Kira's voice crackled in their comms. "I've got eyes on a suspicious group. East corner, near the monument. Definitely not locals." The crew converged on the location, subtly as a pack of wolves in a chicken coop. There they were, three figures standing apart, their clothes just a little too clean, their gazes just a little too focused. The Muroth. Voss didn't know what he expected, tentacles, maybe, or breathing fire, but they looked almost human, which was somehow worse. "All right, Zuri," Voss whispered, "time for your magic." With a nod, Zuri edged closer, gadget in hand, her movements swift and practiced. If the Muroth noticed, they didn't give any sign. Voss watched as Zuri planted the disruptor beneath a bench, her actions concealed in the casual glance of a tourist. "Device is set," Zuri murmured. "Now we just need to activate it without drawing attention." "On my mark," Voss said, readying himself. They just needed a distraction, something to turn all eyes away for a precious second. Milo piped up, his voice laced with mischief. "I've got an idea. Give me a second." Voss had more than enough reasons to worry when Milo had ideas, but desperate times, right? A moment later, a loud crash echoed through the square as a nearby maintenance droid went haywire, spinning in circles and spraying water in every direction. "Nice touch, Milo," Voss said, grinning. "Zuri now." Zuri hit the button, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, the disruptor whirred to life, its high-pitched hum barely audible over the chaos. The Muroth twitched, their expressions contorting in confusion as the device scrambled their temporal signatures. Voss watched, heart in his throat, as they faltered, struggling to maintain their grip on this timeline. "Let's move," Voss ordered, backing away as the Muroth turned their attention from the crowd to their own failing plans. The crew slipped back through the throng, just another group of tourists fleeing a malfunctioning droid. Behind them, the Muroth's interference unraveled, their grip on the timeline slipping like water through cupped hands. Back on the ChronoBound, Kira punched the engines, and the ship leaped back into the time stream, leaving the chaos of 2120 behind. "One down," she said, her voice tinged with relief. "How many more to go?" "Too many," Voss replied, though a smile played at his lips. "But one less than before. Let's keep it that way." Zuri slumped back in her seat, the thrill of success wearing off to reveal the exhaustion beneath. Not bad for first run, she said, stifling a yawn. Dr. Kesh nodded. Indeed, let's hope the next ones are as manageable. Voss chuckled. Hope's a rare commodity these days, but I'll take a little where I can get it. As they set course for the next target, Voss settled back, the weight of the universe still pressing down, but now with a little less urgency. They had a long way to go, but they'd proven that the Muroth weren't invincible, and that, for today, was victory enough. The ChronoBound had the subtlety of a brick through a window when it burst out of the time stream, creaking and groaning like an old man getting out of bed. Ren Voss was still nursing a headache from their last escapade in 2120. It wasn't every day you stopped a pack of time-traveling janitors from wiping out human history, but the cost was high. His headache had developed its own headache, which was impressive in its own right. So, where to next? Voss asked, slumped in his captain's chair, the upholstery more duct tape than fabric. Kira was already fiddling with her data slate, fingers flying over the screen. Next up, we're headed for 2357. Apparently. The Muroth have taken a shine to the Third Martian Rebellion. I hear it's got all the fun of a civil war, but with more red dust clogging your lungs. Voss sighed, not because he cared much for Martian politics, but because the Martians were particularly fond of the color red. Even their rebels wore it. Just what I needed. Color-coded war. Milo grunted from beneath a console where he was probably violating some health and safety regulation. You know, I always wanted to see Mars. Guess we're doing it the hard way. Story of our lives, Zuri added, her purple hair a vibrant contrast against the dull, metallic backdrop of the ChronoBound. She was busy tweaking the oh crap button, which was less comforting than it should have been. Prepare for temporal insertion, Kira said. Just a reminder, Mars has lower gravity, so try not to jump too high. Last thing we need is someone getting stuck in the ceiling. Noted, Voss replied. Everyone control your inner kangaroo. The ship lurched forward, bending time and space like a cheap plastic toy, until they found themselves in the midst of Martian chaos. The surface was a dusty landscape of craters and rocks, like a teenager's acne-ridden face. Voss was not impressed. Kira brought them in low, skimming over the terrain until the settlement appeared on the horizon. It was a hodgepodge of domes and spires, all streaked with the ubiquitous Martian dust. Smoke rose from a few points, suggesting that the locals were keeping busy with the universal pastime of blowing things up. All right, people, Voss said, standing up and doing his best to look like a leader who had a clue. The Muroth are probably hiding in one of those domes. Zuri, you and your gadgets are up again. She saluted with mock seriousness. I'll do my best to not blow us up along with them. No promises, though. As they prepared to disembark, Dr. Kesh gave her usual warnings about timelines and paradoxes, which everyone promptly ignored. The crew was out the door in record time, too jaded to worry about the universe imploding because someone sneezed wrong. Mars, as it turned out, wasn't very welcoming. The air inside the settlement was stale, a mix of recycled oxygen and the ever-present tang of burnt metal. The inhabitants were a mix of soldiers and civilians, all looking far too serious for Voss's taste. Keep it casual, Voss said, striding down the main thoroughfare like he owned the place. We're just tourists with a keen interest in local uprisings. Kira scanned the area, her sharp eyes missing nothing. There's something off about that dome on the left. Too many guards. Perfect, Voss said. Let's crash their party. 2 guards blocked their entry, looking about as welcoming as a cat with an empty food bowl. Voss approached them with a grin that was mostly fake. Hey there, we're new around here. Mind if we take a look inside? The guards exchanged a look. The kind that usually preceded a polite no. But before they could respond, Zuri casually dropped a small device at their feet. There was a faint whir, and the guards suddenly looked very, very sleepy. Nighty-night, Zuri said, as they slumped to the ground. Was that necessary? Voss asked, stepping over one of the unconscious men. Probably not, Zuri admitted, but it was fun. Inside the dome, the Muroth were hard at work, fiddling with a device that looked suspiciously like it could end civilization as they knew it. Voss wasn't one for technical jargon, but even he could tell that oversized metal contraption was bad news. Okay, let's do this quick and quiet, Voss whispered, though not too quietly. He had a habit of being loud at the worst possible times. Zuri was already setting up her gadgets, while Milo eyed the Muroth's device with professional disdain. Looks like they've got a temporal distortion generator. Nasty piece of work. Can you disable it? Kira asked, peering around a corner. Milo shrugged. I can break it until it works. Perfect, Voss said. I do love a man with a plan. As Milo moved in, Zuri kept watch, her fingers twitching over her gadgets. The Muroth were oblivious, too wrapped up in their scheming to notice the intruders. That was until Milo managed to trip an alarm, which, to his credit, was almost impressive given there was no visible alarm system. Well, that's not ideal, Voss said as red lights flared around them, bathing the room in a sinister glow. Looks like we're improvising, Zuri said, hitting the oh crap button. The Muroth's generator whined, then sputtered, its lights flickering like a disco on its last legs. The Muroth spun around, their human-like facades twisting into expressions of surprise. Voss decided it was the perfect time to start shooting. When in doubt, shoot it out, his personal motto. Fall back, people, Voss shouted as Kira covered their retreat with precise, efficient shots that would have made a sniper proud. Milo, still fiddling with the generator, gave it a hard kick before sprinting back. That should do it. Should, Voss echoed, incredulous. The generator began to spark and shudder, the whine turning into a high-pitched shriek that made Voss's teeth ache. As they bolted for the exit, the device finally gave up the ghost, collapsing in a heap of smoldering parts. Well, at least it's not our problem anymore, Zuri said, as the crew dashed back to the ChronoBound, the sound of angry Muroth hot on their heels. Just another day in paradise, Voss muttered, as they clambered aboard and sealed the hatch. Kira wasted no time, launching them back into the time stream as the Muroth scrambled to give chase. The ChronoBound shuddered, groaning like an old ship past its prime, but held together long enough to escape. One more crisis averted, Zuri said, collapsing into her seat. Barely, Voss replied, running a hand through his hair which seemed determined to defy gravity. Let's hope the next one's less explosive. I doubt it, Kira said, smirking, but at least we're getting good at this. Dr. Kesh, who had remained remarkably composed through the ordeal, finally spoke up. I've been thinking. Dangerous pastime, Voss interrupted with a grin. True, but hear me out, Kesh continued. The Muroths seem to be escalating. They're not just meddling, they're bringing out the big guns. The implication hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. Voss didn't like the sound of that one bit. So what, they've got a new toy and they're itching to use it. Exactly, Kesh replied. And if that generator was any indication, they're not holding back. Great, Voss said, rubbing his temples. And here I was hoping for a quiet afternoon. Sorry to rain on your parade. Zuri teased, but I think we've got more storms ahead. Wonderful, Voss said, dry as the Martian desert they'd just left. Well, let's not give them the satisfaction of wiping us out just yet. As they plotted the course for their next mission, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that they were being toyed with. The Muroth were cunning, and if they were pulling out all the stops, it meant something big was on the horizon. Keep your wits about you, he said to the crew. We're in for a bumpy ride, and I don't think we'll be getting any in-flight snacks. Good thing I've got a stash, Milo mumbled, producing a granola bar from his pocket. You're a lifesaver, Milo, Zuri said, snatching it from him. Hey, sharing is caring, Milo protested, but there was no real heat in his words. Voss watched them bicker with a small smile, the kind that came from watching your dysfunctional family squabble while the universe tried to end you. They'd made it this far, and if he had anything to say about it, they'd keep going. Next stop, wherever the Muroth least expect us, Voss said, as they disappeared into the time stream once more, the stars blurring into lines of light streaking across the void, a reminder that time waited for no one, not even a ragtag crew determined to save humanity's sorry skin from extinction. Captain Ren Voss leaned back in his chair, which groaned its protest, much like everything else on the ChronoBound. He ran a hand through his hair, which seemed to have undergone a hostile takeover by static electricity. All right, team, he began, trying to sound more like a leader and less like a reluctant babysitter. I'm thinking we could use a bit of downtime before our next dance with death. Kira Tan, his first officer, rolled her eyes, a gesture that seemed permanently etched into her DNA. Downtime. On this ship, you're more likely to find a coherent thought in Milo's head. Hey, I resent that, Milo Jax called from beneath a console where he was busy trying to make the ChronoBound less of a death trap. I have at least one coherent thought a day, sometimes even two. Careful, Milo, Zuri Korvath chimed in, her vibrant purple hair like a beacon of rebellion against their drab surroundings. You don't want to overwhelm yourself, might pop a neuron. Beside them, Dr. Elandra Kesh fiddled with a temporal scanner, her expression a blend of worry and determination. I hate to rain on the sarcasm parade, but the Muroth are intensifying their efforts. If their past moves were a gentle nudge, their next one's shaping up to be a full-on shove off a cliff. Voss sighed, rubbing his temples. Perfect, as if we didn't have enough problems without time itself throwing a tantrum. Kira glanced over her data slate, a frown etching deeper into her face. They're not just playing with time anymore. They're smashing it like a kid with a new toy and no bedtime. Well, that's a comforting thought, Voss muttered. Any bright ideas on how to stop them? We could always ask nicely, Milo suggested, emerging from under the console with a smudge of grease on his cheek. In my experience, asking politely while holding a wrench tends to get results. Then we'll need a bigger wrench, Zuri said, not missing a beat. The Muroth are acting like time's their personal chew toy, and we're the ones who will end up cleaning the mess. Suddenly, a loud clank echoed through the ship, followed by a shudder that rattled Voss's teeth. What the hell was that? He demanded. Nothing to worry about, Milo said, his voice a tad too cheerful for anyone's peace of mind. Just a minor adjustment, or a major one, hard to say. Voss gave him a look that could have peeled paint. Next time, try to avoid adjustments that sound like the ship's about to explode. Where's the fun in that? Milo replied, a crooked grin plastered on his face. Kesh cleared her throat, drawing their attention back to more pressing matters. We need a plan, one that doesn't involve us accidentally wiping ourselves from existence. Suggestions? Voss asked, looking around at his motley crew. And remember, murder-suicide isn't an option. Kira tapped her slate. We need to find the Muroth's next target and beat them to it. Hit them where it hurts before they know what's coming. And how exactly do we do that? Zuri asked. Eyebrow arched. By being smarter than them, Kira replied, her voice tinged with challenge. High bar, Milo mumbled. We just need to keep them guessing, Voss said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming with the kind of reckless determination that usually preceded terrible decisions. If we can disrupt their plans long enough, maybe we can figure out what they're really after. Which means more running, less dying, Zuri noted. I like this plan already. Voss stood, his chair protesting once more. All right, folks, gear up. We've got a date with Destiny, and I'm not planning on bringing flowers. As the crew prepared, Kesh approached Voss, her expression unreadable. Ren, we need to be careful. The Muroth are playing a different game now. If we're not cautious, we might not make it back. Doc, I promise you this, Voss said, clapping her on the shoulder. We'll make it back, if only to keep making the universe's worst coffee. Kesh chuckled, a small, weary sound. I'll hold you to that. The ChronoBound lurched into motion, its engines groaning like an old man with gout. As they slipped through the time stream, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a whole lot worse. They emerged from the time stream into the chaos of an asteroid belt, each rock spinning through space like a deranged juggler's nightmare. Of course, Voss muttered. Why wouldn't it be an asteroid belt? Kira navigated the ship with deft precision, her eyes flicking over the controls. Hold on to something. It's about to get bumpy. Define bumpy, Zuri asked, clinging to her console like a lifeline. Somewhere between roller coaster and impending doom, Kira replied, her focus unbreakable. Asteroids zipped past them, each one a potential death sentence. Voss held his breath, a silent prayer to whatever cosmic deity might be listening. Remind me why we thought this was a good idea. Could be worse, Milo said, his attempts at optimism falling flat. We could be outside. Voss didn't dignify that with a response. Instead, he concentrated on the task at hand, surviving the meteorological apocalypse outside and finding a way to stop the Muroth from erasing them all from history. Just as they cleared the worst of the asteroids, the ship lurched violently, alarms blaring like a symphony of bad news. What now? Voss shouted over the noise. Something hit us, Milo shouted back, already scrambling to a console. We've got a breach in the forward section. Fantastic, Voss muttered. Just what we needed. Zuri pulled up a schematic on her display. We've lost primary power to the shields. If something else hits us, we're toast. Well, that's a delightful thought, Voss said. Kira, get us somewhere safe. Milo, do whatever you can to patch us up. On it, Milo replied, diving into action with the sort of enthusiasm usually reserved for kids and candy, as the crew worked frantically to stabilize the ship. Voss couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut. They were outgunned, outmatched, and dangerously close to out of time. But what other choice did they have? The Muroth were tearing through time like a child through a candy store, and unless they stopped them, humanity's future was looking less like a heroic saga and more like a tragic epitaph. Kira guided them to a remote section of space, far from prying eyes and potential threats. This should give us a breather, she said, her voice tinged with weariness that matched the rest of them. Let's hope it's enough, Voss replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Milo, how's it looking? Like a bad day at the scrapyard, Milo said, emerging from the depths of the ship with a bundle of wires and a resigned expression. I can patch us up temporarily, but we're gonna need some proper repair soon. Otherwise, we might end up as space dust. Noted, Voss said. Zuri, any luck with the oh crap button? Not yet, but I'm working on it, Zuri replied, her fingers dancing over her gadgets. Give me a few minutes and I'll see if I can give us a fighting chance. Kesh approached them, her concern palpable. Ren, we can't keep running like this. We need a plan that doesn't involve lurching from one disaster to the next. Believe me, Doc, I'm open to suggestions, Voss said, rubbing his temples. But until we figure out what the Muroth are really after, all we can do is try to stay one step ahead. And hope we don't trip, Kira added dryly. Voss managed a weak smile. Exactly. Now, let's see if we can't find a way to turn this mess around. As he surveyed his crew, battered but unbroken, Voss couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. They were a ragtag bunch, but they'd faced worse odds before and lived to tell the tale. If anyone could stop the Muroth, it was them. All right, team, Voss said, his voice steady despite the chaos. Let's get to work. We've got a universe to save and a future to reclaim. Kira nodded, determination in her eyes. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get to see tomorrow. Zuri grinned, her fingers never pausing their work. And if we don't, at least we'll go out with style. Milo snorted. Style doesn't mean much when you're a smear on the space-time continuum. Maybe not, Voss said, his grin matching Zuri's, but it's the thought that counts. As the crew settled into the grim task ahead, Voss allowed himself a moment of reflection. They were far from out of danger, but as long as they had each other, there was still hope. And hope was a powerful thing, even in the darkest corners of the universe. The ChronoBound groaned its way through the asteroid belt, a flying junk pile held together by duct tape, luck, and stubbornness. Captain Ren Voss sat in the cockpit, wrestling with the controls like they owed him money. Sweat trickled down his temple as he tried not to think about how close they were to becoming cosmic roadkill. Whoever programmed the ship's AI to navigate this mess should be shot, Voss muttered, gripping the console as if sheer willpower could keep it from disintegrating in his hands. Relax, Captain, Kira said, her eyes glued to the data slate. With your luck, you'd probably miss anyway. Voss shot her a look that could have curdled milk. You ever wonder why we're always on the brink of annihilation? Like the universe has a personal vendetta against us. Well, we did piss off the Muroth, Kira pointed out, tapping away at her slate. Apparently they don't like it when you call their time tinkering a phase. Voss snorted. Yeah, well, they can shove their cosmic superiority complex. We're not just gonna roll over and let them rewrite history like a bad first draft. Speaking of which, Milo Jax chimed in, poking his head out from beneath the console. I think I've found the problem with the shields. What's the issue? Voss asked, not really wanting to hear the answer. Remember that time we got caught in a temporal vortex and you said, don't worry, it's just like a space tornado, Milo said with a grin. Turns out it's worse for the wiring than we thought. Voss groaned. Great, that was on my list of things to never think about again, right next to Muroth diplomacy tactics and Zuri's cooking. Speaking of Zuri, Milo continued, she's got the oh crap button working again, sort of. It might just turn the ship into a giant paperweight though. Well, that's reassuring, Voss muttered. Good to know our survival hinges on a button that might kill us faster than our enemies. Just then, Zuri Korvath strode in, her vibrant purple hair looking more like a defiant flag than ever. I heard my cooking mentioned, she said, a smirk playing on her lips. Yeah, just telling Milo here that your cooking's in the top 3 list of things I'd rather not revisit, Voss replied. Don't worry, Captain, Zuri said, crossing her arms. I was going to make you a special dinner, but then I remembered I like you alive. Glad to see hospitality's not dead in space, Voss said. Speaking of which, any hope from the oh crap button? Zuri shrugged. It might buy us a few seconds or it might implode the ship. We won't know until we try. Fantastic, Voss said dryly. Just what I needed to hear to soothe my nerves, Doctor. Elandra Kesh entered the cockpit, her expression one of controlled panic. She held her temporal scanner like a talisman against doom. Captain, I've got some bad news, she said, her voice tinged with the kind of dread that only comes from cosmic catastrophes. Please, Doc, tell me something's going right for once, Voss pleaded. The Muroth are targeting the Renaissance next, Kesh said, her eyes grave. If they succeed, we might as well kiss all of modern history goodbye. We're talking a complete erasure. Kira rolled her eyes. They really know how to pick their targets, don't they? Yeah, like a cat with a laser pointer, Milo added. Except we're the ones going blind from the effort. Voss leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if seeking divine intervention. All right, team. Time's running out faster than Zuri's patience at a Muroth banquet. What's the plan? We need to intercept them before they get there, Kira said. But with our ship falling apart and limited resources, we're gonna need a miracle. A miracle or a death wish, Zuri corrected. Don't see either on the horizon. Then we make our own luck, Voss declared, a resolve hardening in his eyes. We hit them where it hurts and pray to every star out there that they slip up. Milo chuckled. Praying's not really our style, more like wing it and hope for the best. Well, it's all we've got, Voss replied. And if we fail, well, at least we won't be around to see how monumentally we screwed up. Kesh nodded, her expression softening. Ren, if anyone can pull this off, it's us. We've faced worse odds. Yeah, like Zuri's cooking, Milo said with a wink. Keep making jokes like that, Milo, and I might just serve you another meal. Zuri threatened with a mock glare. With a weary sigh, Voss stood, squaring his shoulders. All right, folks, strap in. Diving into the fire, and I don't plan on getting crispy. The ChronoBound lurched once more, its engines protesting the abuse as they sped through the void. The crew worked in grim determination, each knowing they were hurtling toward the kind of danger that made black holes look like kiddie pools. As they neared their destination, the tension in the cockpit was thick enough to choke on. Voss could feel the weight of their mission pressing down harder than a bad hangover. If they failed, the whole of human history would be rewritten, and not with a happily ever after. Kira, status update, Voss barked, his voice a thin veneer over his anxiety. Closing in on the Muroth's location, Kira replied, her fingers dancing across the console. With any luck, we'll catch them with their metaphorical pants down. That's the plan, Voss said. Milo, how's the hull holding up? Like a drunk on a unicycle, Milo reported. It's wobbly, but it's still moving. Good enough for me, Voss said. Zuri, make sure that button's ready. We might need to push it and pray. Aye, Captain, Zuri said, her tone laced with grim humor. Hope you remembered to pack a rabbit's foot. Kesh checked her scanner, frowning at the readings. We're running out of time, Ren. The Muroth are accelerating their plans. We need to move now. Voss nodded, the reality of their situation settling like lead in his stomach. All right, people. Let's show these Muroth bastards what we're made of. The ChronoBound approached the target coordinates, the ship's creaks and groans the only accompaniment to the crew's tense silence. Voss felt a familiar adrenaline surge, the kind that came before a reckless gamble. Time to make history, he said, a wry smile tugging at his lips, or at least try not to erase it. As they emerged from the void, the sight before them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Muroth's temporal array stretched out in a web of shimmering light, each strand like a thread of destiny they were determined to cut. Looks like we found the nest, Milo commented, a note of awe in his voice. Yeah, Voss said. Let's just hope we brought enough bug spray. Kira guided the ship into position, her hands steady on the controls. Ren, we've got incoming, she warned. Voss watched as Muroth vessels moved to intercept them, sleek and deadly like a pack of cosmic wolves. All right, everybody, let's give them a fight they won't forget. The Muroth ships closed in, weapons primed and ready. Voss felt the weight of the moment, the realization that this was it, their last stand. Their chance to save humanity from oblivion. Zuri, hit the button, Voss ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. Zuri's fingers danced over her console, her eyes alight with a mix of fear and excitement. Here goes nothing. The oh crap button engaged, sending a pulse through the ChronoBound. The ship shuddered, its systems flickering as if caught in a temporal storm. Hold on, Milo shouted, gripping his station for dear life. The Muroth ships hesitated, their formation disrupted by the unexpected pulse. Voss seized the moment, ordering Kira to push forward, cutting through their ranks like a knife through butter. Keep it steady, Kira, Voss said, adrenaline surging. Trying, Kira replied, her voice a thin line of concentration. The ChronoBound ducked and weaved, avoiding the Muroth's attacks with a dexterity that belied its battered state. Voss felt a thrill, a defiance rising in him that refused to bow to fate. Doc, how are we doing on time? Voss asked, sparing a glance at Kesh. Running on borrowed minutes, Kesh replied, her expression tight. We need to disable that array now. All right, team, let's finish this, Voss said, determination hardening his voice. Milo and Zuri worked in tandem, coordinating their efforts to unleash a barrage of countermeasures. The Muroth array flickered, its power fluctuating under the assault. Voss felt the tension ratchet higher, the stakes never clearer. Kira, bring us around. We're going for the core. On it, Kira said, her eyes never leaving the controls. The ChronoBound surged forward, its engines screaming in protest. They had one shot, one chance to stop the Muroth and save the Renaissance. Zuri, Milo, give us everything you've got, Voss ordered, his heart pounding. With a final burst, the ChronoBound released its payload, a concentrated blast aimed straight at the array's heart. Voss held his breath, the world narrowing to this one moment. The explosion rippled through space, a brilliant flare that consumed the array in a blaze of defiance. Voss watched as the Muroth vessels faltered, their cohesion shattered. We did it, Milo breathed, disbelief in his voice. Don't jinx it, Zuri snapped, though her eyes shone with triumph. Voss let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. All right, let's get the hell out of here before they regroup. I've had enough of playing interstellar tag. Kira nodded, guiding the ship away from the chaos, leaving behind the remnants of the Muroth's plans. As they sped through space, Voss allowed himself a moment of relief. They had fought and won, against odds that should have crushed them. Captain Kesh said, a small smile breaking her serious demeanor. We've bought ourselves some time. Let's make sure we use it wisely. Voss nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, maybe even brew a cup of that terrible coffee. The crew settled back into their stations, exhaustion mingling with a quiet sense of victory. They had faced their darkest hour and emerged blinking into the light, as the ChronoBound soared through the void. Voss couldn't help but think they might just have a chance after all. They were battered, bruised, but unbroken, a testament to humanity's stubborn refusal to go quietly into the night, and that was something worth fighting for. The ChronoBound's mess hall was a testament to unpleasant aromas. Voss peered into his mug, suspicious of the sludgy brew that even the most desperate caffeine addicts would avoid. It was a smell you could see if you squinted hard enough. If that doesn't wake us up, it'll at least make our death slightly more merciful, he muttered, sipping with caution. Kira sat across from him, eyes on her data slate, tapping with the kind of fervor usually reserved for lottery winners and bomb diffusers. Captain, we've got bigger problems than your choice in beverages. The Muroth might have more tricks up their spindly sleeves. Voss raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, they're planning to erase more of history's greatest hits, maybe Shakespeare's next. I always thought Romeo and Juliet could do with a bit of trimming. Close, Kira replied, not looking up. More like Newton and his little apple. We'd be stuck with flat earth theories and neckbeards proclaiming the truth. Well, we can't have that, Voss said dryly. We need to stop them before they turn the Renaissance into a cosmic joke. Zuri, her hair a vibrant shade of defiance, barged in, tools clinking like a particularly angry wind chime. Captain, you're gonna love this, she said, sliding into a seat, while poking around the Muroth's encryption. Wait. You cracked Muroth encryption? Milo interrupted from his spot under a console, eyes wide. Aren't those things harder to decode than a teenager's mood swings? Yes, well, I'm talented like that, Zuri shot back, grinning with the satisfaction of a cat who just figured out how to open the treat drawer. Turns out their encryption isn't just gibberish. It's got a rhythm to it, like a really obnoxious song stuck in your head. Voss leaned forward, curiosity piqued. What did you find? Zuri tapped the side of her head as if that would spill the beans. A vulnerability in their temporal tech. It's like they left the back door open while robbing the universe blind. The room went quiet, everyone processing the implications. So you're saying we might have a way to hit them where it hurts, Kira said, the corner of her mouth twitching into a half-smile. Exactly, Zuri confirmed. We exploit this, and it's like yanking their power cord mid-heist. Voss felt a flicker of hope, a rare guest aboard the ChronoBound. All right, team, this is the break we've been waiting for. We need a plan, and fast. Milo slid out from beneath the console, dusting himself off. You want fast? Let's just strap some rockets to the problem and call it a day. Or we could use Zuri's find to scramble their systems, Kira suggested, practicality shining through her sarcasm. Make them chase their own tails for once. I like the way you think, Voss said, a spark of excitement in his eyes. We'll turn their tech against them and make sure they can't meddle with history anymore. Zuri cracked her knuckles, ready for a challenge. Then let's get to it. I've already started a rudimentary program, but it'll need some finesse. Dr. Elandra Kesh entered, clutching her ever-present temporal scanner. She surveyed the room, sensing the shift in mood. Did someone finally invent a machine that brews drinkable coffee, or is there actually good news for once? Believe it or not, we might have found a way to hobble the Muroth, Voss replied, a grin breaking the usual lines of worry on his face. Kesh let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Well, it's about time something went our way, but remember this is still a long shot. Long shot's better than no shot, Voss said, determination lacing his voice. We'll make this work or die trying. Kira rolled her eyes. I'd prefer the first option. Dying's never been high on my to-do list. The crew set to work, the mess hall turning into a makeshift command center. Zuri and Milo huddled over a terminal, their banter punctuated by the sound of frantic typing. If this doesn't work, I'll eat my own wrench, Milo declared, half joking. Considering your cooking skills, it might be more edible, Zuri shot back, winking. Voss felt a glimmer of pride watching his crew. They were a ragtag bunch, barely holding it together, but damn if they weren't the best chance humanity had. Kira, keep an eye on our position. We need to be ready to move the moment things go south. On it, Captain, Kira replied, glancing out at the vast stretch of stars. We're close enough to jump in fast, but far enough to have some breathing room if things get hairy. Things always get hairy, Voss sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I think it's cosmic law at this point. As the hours ticked by, the tension in the air was palpable, mixed with a strange sense of camaraderie. They were in this together against all odds, staring down the barrel of fate and daring it to blink first. Finally, Zuri stood up, stretching with a satisfied groan. All right, it's ready. This code should mess with their temporal array long enough for us to make our move. Good work, Voss said, clapping her on the shoulder. Let's plug this in and show the Muroth we're not just fancy apes throwing rocks. Kira and Milo exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement that they might not get another chance like this. Ready when you are, Captain, Milo said, a note of resolve in his voice. Let's do it, Voss replied, the gravity of the moment sinking in. For humanity and all that sappy stuff. The crew took their stations, each one a cog in the desperate machine of their plan. Voss felt the familiar thrumming of the ship beneath his feet, a reminder that they were still in the fight. Zuri engaged the program, Voss ordered, voice steady despite the roiling tension. Zuri's fingers flew over the console, activating the code designed to exploit the Muroth's weakness. Program's running, she reported, eyes fixed on the screen. Kira monitored the ship's sensors, her expression one of hard focus. Muroth activity is spiking, they know something's up. Good, Voss said, let's keep them guessing. Milo watched the readouts, his face a mixture of anticipation and dread. If this works, they'll think twice before meddling with us again. If it doesn't, we'll get a first-hand look at what the Renaissance wasn't, Kesh added, her trademark dry humor intact. The seconds ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Voss could feel the weight of it all, the enormity of their gamble. But beneath the fear was a flicker of hope, fueled by the knowledge that they'd come too far to turn back now. Program's reaching critical point, Zuri announced, her voice tight with concentration. Any second now. The ChronoBound shuddered, a ripple of energy coursing through it as the program made contact with the Muroth systems. The crew held their breath, the silence stretching impossibly thin. Then the console lit up with a cascade of alerts, Kira's eyes widening in surprise. It's working. The Muroth systems are going haywire. They're tripping over their own tech. A chorus of relief and triumph echoed through the room, the crew's collective exhale a testament to their resilience. Voss felt the knot in his chest loosen, a grin spreading across his face. We did it, you crazy geniuses. Milo punched the air, a rare display of exuberance. Take that. You overgrown lizards, Zuri laughed, a sound as vibrant as her hair, and they thought they could mess with us. Voss allowed himself a moment to savor the victory, the sweet taste of success against impossible odds, but the battle wasn't over yet. All right, let's not get cocky. We need to capitalize on this before they regroup. Kira nodded, already plotting their next move. We should strike their core systems while they're reeling, make sure they can't just reset and start over. Exactly, Voss agreed, a new energy in his stride. Let's hit them hard and fast, make sure this lesson sticks. The crew rallied, the camaraderie of shared purpose binding them together. They were more than just a ragtag group of misfits. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they were out to prove it. As the ChronoBound surged forward, Voss felt a rare surge of optimism. For the first time in a long time, the future seemed a little less bleak. They were fighting for something bigger than themselves, and that was worth every risk. In the vastness of space, a single ship hurtled toward its destiny, defying the odds and daring the universe to stand in its way. And as they closed in on the Muroth, Voss knew they were ready to fight, ready to win, and most importantly, ready to remind the cosmos that humanity was no one's pawn. "Let's make history," he said, his voice carrying the weight of resolve and a challenge to the stars. The ChronoBound hummed with a nervous energy. Its crew a jumble of nerves, adrenaline, and the kind of reckless optimism only found in people with little left to lose. Captain Ren Voss, perched in the worn captain's chair that threatened to collapse under the weight of any particularly ambitious sneeze, surveyed the controlled chaos with an air of grim determination. "All right, folks," Voss announced, his voice cutting through the low hum of systems readying for action. "Time to put on our big kid pants and show those Muroth custodian jerks what happens when you mess with our history." Kira Tan, who had perfected the art of the skeptical eye roll, muttered, "Let's hope those pants still fit after all the stress eating." Captain Milo Jax chimed in, still fiddling with a particularly stubborn console. "How do we know this is going to work? The Muroth aren't exactly known for their forgiving nature." "We don't," Voss replied, grinning like a man who just cheated death and was ready to try again. "But we've got one thing they don't: Zuri's talent and my willingness to risk it all on a hunch." Zuri Korvath flashed a quick smile, her hair a vibrant warning beacon of her audacity. "Always nice to be appreciated, even if it's because our lives depend on it." Dr. Elandra Kesh, fiddling with her temporal scanner, snorted. "And here I was thinking my medical degree would be the most important thing on this ship. Turns out, it's Zuri's ability to think like a criminal mastermind." "Hey, if the shoe fits," Zuri retorted, eyes gleaming with mischief. With a nod from Voss, she initiated the program, a carefully crafted digital virus designed to wreak havoc on the Muroth's temporal systems. The ship's lights flickered, a momentary protest before stabilizing, and the crew waited, tension coiling tight like a spring. "How long until we know if it worked?" Milo asked, the question hanging in the air like a guillotine blade. Kira glanced at her data slate, fingers dancing across the screen with practiced efficiency. "We should start seeing signs of Muroth chaos any second now. If we're lucky, this could be the cosmic equivalent of slipping on a banana peel." Voss leaned forward, eyes locked on the viewing screen. "Let's just hope they hit the ground harder than the slapstick comedies they've turned our history into." As if on cue, the ChronoBound shuddered, and the console erupted in a fit of frantic beeping. Kira's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and vindication. "It's working, their systems are going haywire." Milo let out a breathless laugh. "Ha, looks like we've finally given them a taste of their own medicine. And a spoonful of chaos makes the medicine go down," Zuri quipped, fingers still flying over her keyboard. Voss nodded, his own adrenaline-fueled excitement tempered by the knowledge that they were far from safe. "All right, people, this is our shot. We need to hit their core systems and make sure they can't bounce back." Kira, ever the realist, added, "And while we're at it, we should probably make sure they don't get the chance to rewrite us into a footnote." The ship surged forward, the ChronoBound charging into the fray with a defiant, albeit cobbled-together, sense of purpose. The Muroth fleet, usually so meticulously organized, now scattered like a flock of startled birds as their systems struggled against the coding onslaught. "Where should we strike first?" Milo asked, his eyes glued to the tactical display. "Their central command node," Voss replied, voice full of the rare confidence of a gambler holding a royal flush. "If we take that out, they won't be able to coordinate their efforts to undo the damage." Dr. Kesh, who was watching the unfolding chaos with an air of clinical detachment, added, "And if we're lucky, it'll take them a few centuries to figure out how to fix it." The crew moved in concert, each member a vital piece of the ChronoBound's wobbly dance towards victory. Zuri's program continued to exploit the weaknesses in Muroth systems, a digital termite chewing through the foundations of their temporal supremacy. As the ship closed in on its target, Voss couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of their situation. A ragtag crew of humans, armed with little more than a few clever tricks and a surplus of determination, going toe-to-toe with a race that saw themselves as the custodians of time itself. And yet, here they were. A flicker of hope in the vast darkness of space, proving that humanity wasn't ready to be written off just yet. "Looks like they're trying to reroute power," Kira warned, eyes scanning the data slate with laser focus. "If they manage to stabilize, we're going to have a real fight on our hands." "Then let's not give them the chance," Voss said, his voice carrying the weight of every desperate gamble they'd made leading up to this point. "Kira, adjust our trajectory. Milo, I need every ounce of speed this bucket of bolts can muster. Zuri, keep them blind and deaf." The crew responded with a flurry of activity, each action a testament to their shared resolve. The ChronoBound hurtled towards the Muroth command node, a glinting prize amidst the chaos. "Brace for impact," Voss ordered, a fierce grin playing on his lips as they prepared to deliver the final blow. The ship shuddered again, this time with the unmistakable jolt of a successful strike. On the viewing screen, the Muroth command node flickered, its once imposing presence dimming as their systems crumbled. "We did it," Zuri exclaimed, her triumph echoed by the smiles breaking out among the crew. Voss allowed himself a brief moment of elation before the practicalities of survival reasserted themselves. "All right, let's not stick around for the party. Time to make our exit before they decide to return the favor." Milo chuckled, already plotting their escape route. "Guess they won't be inviting us back for tea and biscuits." Kira snorted, unless their idea of biscuits involves sending us into a temporal black hole. The crew worked with the efficiency of a well-trained unit, each member fully aware of the stakes and their role in the grand ballet of desperation that was their lives. The ChronoBound wheeled around, engines flaring as they sped away from the destabilized Muroth systems. As the distance between them grew, Voss allowed himself a moment to exhale, the tension that had knotted his shoulders slowly unspooling. "Hell of a job, everyone." Dr. Kesh, setting aside her scanner for the first time in what felt like ages, offered a rare smile. "And we didn't even rip a hole in the space-time continuum. I'd call that a win." "Don't jinx it," Zuri warned, half serious. "I think we've used up enough luck for one day." Their escape secured, the crew gathered in the mess hall, the air still tinged with the acrid scent of fear and excitement. Voss raised an imaginary glass, the gesture one of solidarity and gratitude, to the ChronoBound and the people who made it more than just a heap of spare parts. "And to the Muroth," Milo added, "for underestimating a group of stubborn humans with a knack for causing trouble." Kira, lifting her own invisible toast, grinned. "May they enjoy their own little cosmic conundrum for a change." Zuri, eyes still alight with the thrill of victory, finished, and here's to rewriting history on our own terms. As the crew shared a moment of camaraderie amidst the wreckage of their latest escapade, Voss felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperamental heating system. They'd faced impossible odds, and while the future remained uncertain, they'd earned the right to hope again. In the end, they'd reminded the universe of one simple truth: humanity was relentless, resourceful, and utterly impossible to control. And as long as there were stars to chart and stories to tell, they'd keep fighting for their place among them. "All right, people," Voss said, clapping his hands and breaking the spell of the moment. "Let's get the ship back in one piece before our luck runs out. We've got a history to preserve, after all." With renewed determination, the crew set to work, each of them carrying the spark of victory and the promise of more battles yet to come. The ChronoBound, battered and bruised, surged forward into the unknown, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who dared to defy the stars. And as they vanished into the depths of space, leaving chaos and possibility in their wake, one thing was clear: the future was theirs to shape, and they intended to do just that. "Well, Voss," Kira said, as she slid into the mess hall with all the grace of a cat that had just knocked over a priceless vase, "we didn't end up as a footnote in history. At least not yet." Voss, leaning back in his chair like a man who just won a marathon only to realize there was another race tomorrow, smirked. "Not bad for a bunch of misfits, though I think Milo here might have been secretly hoping for an early retirement in a temporal anomaly." Milo chuckled from where he was sprawled across the table, a mess of wires and tools spread around him like the aftermath of a particularly aggressive toddler. "Nah, I've got a few more half-baked ideas to test out before I call it quits. Besides, where's the fun in sitting around doing nothing when you can actively contribute to cosmic chaos?" "You know," Zuri added, tapping away on her gadget with the kind of focus usually reserved for bomb defusal, "I heard the Muroth are now considering introducing a whole new chapter to their manual, How Not to Underestimate Humans, a cautionary tale." Her eyes twinkled with mischief, the kind that could light up a solar system. "All thanks to your little digital termite," Dr. Kesh interjected, her voice dry as Martian dust. "I'm still amazed it didn't end up eating our systems instead. I swear half the time I feel like I'm patching up the ship as much as the crew." "Hey, if you're going to cause havoc," Zuri shrugged, entirely unapologetic, "you might as well do it with style." "Speaking of style," Kira said, wrinkling her nose at the coffee-like sludge in her mug, "whoever invented this engine degreaser we call coffee should be put on trial." Voss raised his own mug, taking a sip without flinching. Years of questionable beverages had inured him to anything short of battery acid. "Look on the bright side, it'll put hair on your chest, or melt it off. Either way, it's a win." Dr. Kesh leaned back, a smirk tugging at the corners of her lips. "It's been one hell of a ride, hasn't it? From trying to fix the timeline to almost getting vaporized by time custodians." "Ah yes," Milo chimed in, "the Muroth, guardians of the timeline and the universe's greatest party poopers. They've got about as much humor as a black hole. And we poked them right in their eye," Zuri added, her grin infectious. "Nothing like a little digital slapstick to throw them off their game." The The crew sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. The air around them crackled with the weight of what they'd accomplished. Sure, they'd managed to pull off the impossible, but the Muroth wouldn't stay down forever. History, after all, had a nasty habit of repeating itself. You ever wonder, Kira asked, breaking the silence, what it would be like if we hadn't gotten involved? If the Muroth just had their way with time. Probably depressingly predictable, Voss said, staring into his mug as if contemplating the mysteries of life, or perhaps just why it hadn't dissolved yet. Humans would become a quaint little footnote, a brief and unfortunate existence tucked away in some cosmic library. Yeah, Milo said, sitting up and shaking his head, but where's the fun in that? I prefer my history with a bit more. Freelancing, Doctor. Kesh snorted, freelancing chaos, call it what you will. We've just made ourselves a very interesting footnote instead. As long as we don't end up as the tragic comedy section, Kira replied, I'm good with that. The ship hummed around them, the familiar whir of machinery a comforting backdrop to their banter. The ChronoBound might have been a flying junk pile held together by duct tape and luck, but it was home. Each clank and rattle was as familiar as a heartbeat. Voss sighed, running a hand through his hair, which was in desperate need of a cut. You know, for a second there, I thought we might actually get vaporized. Only for a second, Zuri asked, eyebrows raised. I was counting on at least 5. 5 seconds, Milo asked. That's optimistic. I'm nothing if not an optimist, Zuri said, her grin widening. Besides, what's life without a bit of impending doom? Blissfully boring, I imagine, Kira replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But then again, I've never been one for the quiet life. Quiet is overrated, Doctor. Kesh said, standing and stretching her arms over her head. Give me a little chaos any day, keeps the blood pumping. Or boiling, Voss said with a chuckle. He pushed back from the table, glancing around at his crew, his family. They'd fought too hard and come too far to let the future slip through their fingers now. All right, Voss said, clapping his hands together. We've managed to keep the timeline intact for now, but there's always more work to be done. The universe isn't going to save itself, especially when it keeps trying to make us the punchline, Milo added, smirking. And I'm not keen on being anyone's joke, Kira said, her expression hardening with determination. Zuri leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with mischief and confidence. Then it's a good thing we're the ones riding the punchline, huh? The ChronoBound hurtled through space, its patched-up exterior a testament to battles won and scars earned. Around it, the stars stretched in an endless tapestry, each one a story waiting to unfold. There was a certain beauty in that, the beauty of the unknown of possibility. Hey Voss, Kira called, looking out the nearest viewport at the stars racing by. Think we'll ever get a breather, you know. Actually get a chance to enjoy a victory. Voss laughed, a sound that was more relief than joy. With our luck, probably not, but that's what keeps us interesting. Interesting is one way to put it, Milo said, shaking his head with a bemused grin. I'd go with recklessly idiotic, but that's just me. Reckless, idiotic, potato, Zuri said, waving a dismissive hand. Point is, we're still standing, and as long as we keep standing, we'll keep fighting. Dr. Kesh nodded, her expression thoughtful. And as long as we keep fighting, the Muroth won't know what hit them. Voss nodded, feeling the weight of their victory settle into his bones with a satisfying kind of weariness. They'd done the impossible. But the fight was far from over. The Muroth would regroup, and when they did, the ChronoBound would be ready. All right, people, Voss said, standing and stretching out his arms with a groan. Let's get this ship back in one piece before something else decides to go wrong. We've got a history to muddle through and futures to secure. The crew dispersed with a kind of relaxed purpose, each heading to their respective stations as the ChronoBound continued its journey through the stars. There was a comfort in the routine, in the knowledge that they'd faced the abyss and lived to tell the tale. Voss lingered for a moment, staring out into space, his mind a whirl of thoughts and possibilities. They'd won this battle. But the war for humanity's place in the cosmos was far from over. There would be more challenges, more impossible odds to overcome. But with this crew, he knew they'd face whatever came their way with courage, wit, and a healthy dose of irreverence. After all, when you've faced down time itself, what's a little uncertainty? He turned, heading back to his post with a renewed sense of purpose. The ChronoBound throbbed with life around him, a patchwork symphony of metal and hope. They might be underdogs, but they were underdogs with a talent for making miracles happen. And in a universe like theirs, that was the kind of power that could change everything. Onward, Voss murmured to himself, a smile playing at his lips as he settled into his chair, ready for whatever came next. Wherever the hell that might be. And so, with engines roaring and spirits high, the ChronoBound surged into the unknown, a beacon of defiance in a universe that didn't know what hit it. They'd made their mark on history, and they were far from finished.